Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back. It's a new year. It's a new day, a new month. It's 2020. And we are continuing the whole thing of the whole Magic the Gathering books series. Anyway, let's get on to it. I'm pretty sure you guys have been waiting for me to continue. All right. Chapter 52. Dovin Ban. It was hardly surprising when the Gorgon returned to Bond's safe house and informed him that his plan had worked perfectly. Equally unsurprising was his response. Of course. He could practically hear her scowl. He went on. I should warn you, it is only a first move upon the chessboard. The first step toward my solution to your problems. A dangerous fragment that could easily backfire without my further assistance. I have not yet given you the plan in its entirety in order to prevent you from executing it and then executing me. So I ask you quite simply, Queen Vraska, do we have an agreement? He paused, which was hardly surprising, but he knew the length of the pause would be very telling. 5.7 seconds or more, and it meant that she was still seriously considering his death. 5.6 seconds or less, and it meant he was only pausing so as not to seem too eager. He waited, counting the ticks in his head. We have an agreement, he said in exactly 5.5 seconds. Ban allowed himself a small smile and then, with a mystic gesture, clarified the terms for the binding mystic record. You agree to secretly keep me alive in exchange for my ongoing service? Yes, she said, as he had known she would. The Gorgon was willing to risk the consequences, choosing Ban and the Golgari over everything else. You do know, he said, that I'll still need proof of your demise for the guilds. Of course, he said again as he crossed the room confident. He opened a closet door. A veiled figure stood within. He removed the veil to reveal a statue, a perfect replica of himself, with a look of terror etched upon his face. Impressive work, he said. Not much in the way of art, and the expression borders on cliché, but it's very realistic, very convincing. Who's the sculptor? I am, he said. I apologize for the expression. I had to create it in a mirror. An emotion does not come naturally to my face. It might have been the perfect proof before you were blinded. You must know it's useless now. No one will believe I petrified a blind man. Indeed, I showed this to you merely to demonstrate how far ahead I have planned my contingencies. This was created in this studio weeks before Lazov blinded me, for although I will admit, I had not planned for such an injury. Our meeting here today, on the other hand, is one that I fully anticipate an 8.9% possibility. And is that really the only reason you have presented this effigy for my perusal? She seemed to be altering her style of diction to match his, though whether consciously or unconsciously was not yet clear. Still, he seriously considered her question for 2.8 seconds before responding. No, I believe you are right. There is an element of vanity to this display. I felt someone should see it. I understand. Good. We understand each other. And the problem of proof, I've been working on an alternative. We'll need witnesses. Well, one witness in particular. Andra Nalaar. Chapter 53. Kaya. Rat was standing over Liliana, holding the tree branch she had used to render the necromancer unconscious. The girl looked fairly proud of herself, but Kaya wasn't in the mood to offer praise. You should have used your daggers, Rat. You could have killed her. I didn't want to. No? Look around you. She was using the undead to kill your friends. But I stopped that, by clonking her. With Liliana unconscious, the three zombies were inert on the ground. Hardly made them less terrifying. Each seemed capable of rising again at any moment. Teo, meanwhile, was still struggling to pry open the grip of the skeletal hand around his ankle. An exasperated Kaya turned on him, barking out, "And you didn't follow orders." "I'm sorry, but that doesn't cut it, Teo. You didn't drop the sphere when I told you, when I was ready. Then you dropped it later, when I wasn't. That could have gotten us both killed." "I dropped the hemisphere when Rat was ready," said, finally freeing his leg with that log. "A good thing too," Rat said to Kaya, "because when you were ready, she was ready, and that could have gotten all three of you killed, and I would have been branded here forever. Besides, you don't really want to kill her now, do you?" "Oh, don't I?" Kaya said, striding toward the unconscious woman with her blades out. Kneeling before Liliana, Kaya held one of her long knives to the woman's throat, just above the golden collar. "Wait, mistress," Rat called out. "I'm not going to have a better opportunity," Kaya stated, though she remained still, neither putting the blade away nor slicing it into skin. "Maybe not now, but I know you're not thrilled about the idea of killing a defenseless woman. You'd be surprised. Just listen, at least. Listen to what I found." So Rat told her story of the party and the servants, and the mistress and her book, and the cabal, and the zombie illusions that became zombie solids after the sapphire in the amulet had emitted the blue smoke. Throughout the telling, Kaya kept her dagger poised at Liliana's throat, while Teo approached slowly, sniffing the air, as Rat finished her tale. "So then I grabbed for... see, basically after the zombie solidified and Mistress Bookcover and the others figured out someone was there, I figured I better get out and come back to report to you two." "You did the right thing," Kaya said, feeling slightly calmer and very tired. Rat's head bobbed up and down. Yep, that's what I did. The right thing." Teo walked right up to Rat and sniffed at her. She gave him a look, but he stepped back and slapped his forehead with the heel of his hand. "Of course! It's a djinn! This fake Liliana Vess has a djinn in her power. That's what I've been sensing and smelling. Djinn smoke. It's in the air all around us. Present, but diffuse. But you were close enough that I can smell it on your clothes and hair." "I'm infected with djinn smoke?" She sniffed at herself and made a face. "Mistress Kaya, can we go back to Orzova so I can take another shower?" Wait, Kaya said. "What's a djinn?" Teo and Rat stared at her. Then Rat turned to Teo and said, "There's something you know that she doesn't? You barely know anything." Kaya said, "Stop it." Teo nodded, saying, No, it's true. I barely know anything." Rat said he'd never seen a Viashino, or a Vidalkin, or 2 days ago. Teo was still nodding. "Or a Leonin, or a Gorgon, or an elf? Oh, or an angel." or a Pegasus, or a Griffin, or a Goblin. Well, at least I've heard of goblins. We have goblins on Gobakon. I just never met any. But, alright, I get the point, Aya said crossly, poking the air with a dagger that wasn't still flush against Liliana's throat. Teo's ignorant, and yet I'm the one who doesn't know what what a djinn is, Rat said, although to be fair, I've never seen a djinn. Really? Teo said, stunned. There's something I've seen that Rat hasn't. I'd never seen a diamond storm before yesterday. Or was that today? I've completely lost track of time. Me too. Enough! Kaya shouted. What's a djinn? Teo crouched down before Kaya to explain. Well, see, there are djinn on Gobakon, small spirits of fire or air that emerge sometimes from the western cloud or the eastern cloud respectively. If you catch one, like inside your geometry, it has to grant you a wish to be released. You ever catch one? Rat asked, excited. No, I was never fast enough. My three-dimensional geometry was pretty awful, really, until I came to Ravnica. But Arturo caught one once. He wished for a hot meat pie, and the abbot later said Arturo was lucky it didn't wind up baked inside the pie. Anyway, djinn don't have a lot of magic. You can't say, wish for the eastern cloud to vanish or anything like that. I mean, you can, but it's not gonna happen. And the djinn are tricksters too, so you have to phrase your wish very carefully. And what makes you think there's one here? Kaya demanded. Well, all djinn, fire djinn and air djinn, smell vaguely of smoke. Sweet smoke, like incense. But none of the djinn of Gobakon are quite this potent. That's why I didn't put it together at first. I saw Arturo's fire djinn up close, but I didn't smell anything from just outside the sphere the djinn was trapped in. I only smelled her smoke after she conjured up the meat pie for Arturo, and he let her go. And within a minute of the djinn disappearing, the smell had dissipated. Here, it's, well, everywhere. It's strong. Whatever djinn this Liliana is using is big and very powerful. My guess is she has him or her trapped in that sapphire amulet. Kaya took all this in and was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, none of this makes any of our business. She turned her attention back to the knife at Liliana's throat. Liliana lay there, still unconscious and unmoving. Kaya began to apply pressure, and a single drop of blood dripped down between her skin and the servant's collar around her neck. Teo and Rat both shouted, Wait! Kaya hesitated, though she wasn't quite sure why. Rat said, You need to help all these people first. The servants. I promised them. Kaya shook her head. We came here to kill Liliana Vess, not free the prisoners of Caligo. But still, hesitated. Rat pounced. But you took an oath to protect people. Never again. Remember? Of course I remember. But there's no reason why we can't free them after we've killed Vess. The real Vess. Theo pointed at Liliana's face. Maybe she has a reason. Aya looked down again. Liliana's eyes were open and staring daggers at the ghost assassin. And still, Aya hesitated. Vess didn't move, took no action, offensive or otherwise. She simply stated, No reason. Just a request. One last request before you kill me. Chapter 54. Ral Zarek. Ral and the Wanderer made their careful way through Tezzeret's base. They weren't trying to be stealthy. It's not like he doesn't know we're here. They were simply trying to avoid the inevitable ambush. Let's face it, we're not going to avoid anything. We just don't want to be taken by surprise. Or, in any case, not so much surprised that we wind up dead before we can get to Tezzeret. But there wasn't a single ambush. There were 3. If Raoul thought he'd taken out all of Tezzeret's gargoyle forces save their leader, he was dead wrong. And almost dead because of it. He and the Wanderer entered a high-ceilinged chamber full of polished stone staircases, immense circular glass windows, and large rotating clockwork gears, all of it decorated by delicate metal filigree. Raoul spent a second or two trying to discern the purpose of the machinery, and quickly came to the conclusion that the clockworks controlled an actual clock, a multiversal clock, with each circular window actually a clock face, showing the time of day on numerous worlds, including Alara, Ravnica, Dominaria, Amonkhet, Innistrad, Kaladesh, Fiora, and others. Seeing his face, the Wanderer asked, "What's wrong?" "Wrong? Nothing. It's a masterpiece." "What are you talking about?" So enthralled was he, and so confused was she, neither noticed at first as the largest of the gears rotated slowly around, bearing Ethereum statues, right up until the point when those statues came to life, with glowing eyes and echoing roars. The gargoyle leader was there, living stone and mutable Ethereum. But he left the battle to his 6 fellows. 2 smaller gargoyles quickly took flight, as 2 hulking gargoyles leapt down from the revolving gear to charge the planeswalkers. Raoul's accumulator was switched on and fully charged, but he was determined not to use even a jewel more than necessary, at least until he faced Tezzeret himself. So he left one of the leaping gargoyles to the Wanderer and blasted the other with just enough juice to shear off its Ethereum head. For her part, the Wanderer used the long reach of her broadsword to achieve the same end. But the 2 now headless gargoyles were only a feint to give the 2 flyers their opportunity. Each scooped a planeswalker into the air and attempted to dash his or her brains against the stone. Raoul lay hands upon his captor and blew a massive hole in its chest that exploded out its back. Trouble was that by this time, Raoul was high enough above the floor that his brains could still wind up dashed. But as the deceased gargoyle fell away, Raoul created multiple small concussive thunder blasts beneath him. They slowed his descent enough so that he hit hard against the stone floor, but not hard enough for any brain dashing. The Wanderer, meanwhile, trapped in the other creature's grip, planeswalked away, gargoyle and all. 3 seconds later, she planeswalked back unencumbered. They were separated now. Raoul was on the ground floor. The Wanderer was atop one of the staircases on the other side of the clockworks. "Where'd it go?" Raoul asked, calling out from across the chamber. "Torn apart within the blind eternities," the Wanderer called back. The gargoyle leader still did not attack. He nodded to his last 2 minions, both of whom advanced, leaping down off the clockworks. Raoul fired another precision strike, but the gargoyle leapt above the blast and came down behind him. One Ethereum arm was shaped like a scimitar, and the creature swung it at Raoul's accumulator. Raoul barely managed to dodge. He toppled and fell on his back. The gargoyle advanced, red eyes glowing, scimitar on the upswing. The other gargoyle rose up on its wings and fired projectile-like claws from both hands. The Wanderer parried most of them with her sword, but one struck her in the shoulder. She hissed inwardly, but otherwise ignored the pain and leapt off the staircase, catching the gargoyle off guard. The sword came down and cut the gargoyle in twain. As the Wanderer tumbled toward the ground far below, she planeswalked away and reappeared a foot or 2 above the floor. She still hit hard, but not as hard as if she had fallen the whole distance. She quickly struggled to her feet, pulled the claw out of her shoulder, and turned her sword toward the gargoyle leader. Meanwhile, Raoul was still on his back, an overturned tortoise weighed down by his heavy accumulator. This was the second time in pretty much as many days that this had happened, and he made a mental note that he'd have to do something about the accumulator's balance. But there wasn't exactly time for that now. The gargoyle's scimitar arm was swinging down, and Raul fired off twin blasts from his hands that sheared off its feet at the calves while simultaneously thrusting him back a good 10 yards out of its reach. The gargoyle came crashing down to its knees, but extended its wings and took to the air. Still on his back, Raul made a slashing move with one hand, and 5 slim electrical bolts radiated off his 5 fingers to cut through the air. The gargoyle corkscrewed to avoid them, and it did avoid 4 of the 5, but the thumb bolt caught the edge of one wing and blew the wing apart. The gargoyle augured in on its remaining wing, attempting to take Raul Zarek out with its final act, but he'd been rocking back and forth, finally building the necessary leverage to roll out of the way. The gargoyle crashed down where Raul no longer was. He rolled back, slapped a hand on it, and fired the creature until its ethereum began to melt. Raul found his feet in time to see the lead gargoyle shake his head and disappear back into the clockwork. "Your shoulder okay?" Raul asked. "It's fine." They entered a circular chamber of no great size, low ceilings, nowhere to hide, and every surface seemed to be covered in dark, burnished glass. Low conductivity. This chamber was practically made to contain me, if not actually made to contain me. A panel slid open in the curved wall, then another, and another. 3 massive squat ethereum golems with hammer-like heads and clamping serrated metal jaws emerged equidistant from one another. They stomped forward on pincer arms and legs. Their craniums barely cleared the ceiling. Once they closed in, there'd be no getting past them. Raul and the Wanderer took positions, standing back to back. Raul shook his head. "Oh, what's the point of putting me in a non-conductive room if you're going to send highly conductive opponents to kill me? Or in other words, what's the catch?" He found out soon enough. As the golems advanced, Raul fired a test blast at the closest one. It hit the creature, ricocheting off to strike one of its fellows, then the third, then back to the first, creating a circuit among all 3. The power kept flowing in circles between them, causing no damage whatsoever. "We may have a problem," Raul said. "It's alright. I can handle them." "Is your sword made of metal?" "Of course it's made." "Ah, yes. I see. Hand it to me, quickly." "It won't work for you the way it works for me. I understand your reluctance, but unless you see another option." The golems were almost upon them. "Here," he said. "Better use 2 hands." He took her advice, and still could barely keep the sword aloft. "Crocked! This thing is heavy!" "I tried to warn you." He rushed forward and swung it down diagonally, adding a little charge to propel it faster. It slashed across the golem's chest and cleaved a pincer arm in 2. Raul's own electricity flowed from the golem circuit back down the sword into his hands. It would have electrocuted the Wanderer, but to Raul Zarek, it was practically mother's milk. Plus, the power replenished his accumulator just a little bit. Missing an arm now, the golem's own weight caused it to buckle and crash to the floor. The Wanderer had to dodge the second golem, and then the third, but with the circuit broken, Raul was able to heave her sword back over to her. Within seconds, she had carved up one, and within a few seconds more, the other. "That was different," he said. "I didn't like it," she responded. He assumed she was scowling, but as usual, he couldn't see her face. Randomly choosing one of the 3 open panels, they moved on. Now they entered an immense workshop with even higher ceilings than the clockwork room had offered. Raul couldn't even see the upper limit of the chamber. Thick black support columns disappeared up into shadow. He was on the alert for trouble. He couldn't help noticing the sheer scope of the place and the sheer quantity of works in progress scattered across the dozens of metal work tables. As the Azet Guildmaster, Ral Zarek prided himself on his ability to quickly size up, evaluate, and identify almost any machine one could imagine. But the quantity of unrecognizable technology in this room alone, this room that Tezzeret didn't seem to mind them seeing, was not making him happy. Every item on every table looked both mysterious and dangerous, and he hesitated to think how each might be used against Ravnica and the multiverse. Ral had been right about Tezzeret developing into a significant threat. The Storm Mage was more than ready to find the Artificer and finish him off once and for all. But the Artificer had other plans. When the two planeswalkers reached the center of the chamber, something dripped down on Ral's head. He looked up toward the shadowy ceiling and barely managed to dodge another glop of a tar-like substance falling from above. Yet another glop marred the Wanderer's wide hat. He felt the goop dripping down his scalp and reached up to wipe it away before it dripped down into his eyes. Instantly, he found that his hand was stuck to his forehead. More of the sticky goop was falling now, missing them but hitting the floor. "Don't get in it!" he shouted. "Yes, I got that." That's when the chamber's columns started to move. Ral didn't know what to make of it at first, until the creature's thorax and head descended from above. The columns weren't columns, but the long, thick legs of a huge, spidery strider dripping sticky sludge from its slavering jaws to entrap its prey. Hampered by having one palm stuck idiotically to his forehead, Ral used his free hand to aim a bolt straight up toward the creature's abdomen, while the Wanderer rushed forward to swing her mighty blade at one of its column-thick legs. These swift, brave actions nearly got them both killed. The monster's stomach split open and a torrent of the sludge came flooding out, hitting the floor and splashing over them both, even as it lost a leg and toppled over to crush them under its weight. With one boot stuck to the floor by the splash of sludge, Ral wasn't able to dodge or duck or roll, and wound up trapped, his own legs pinned beneath another of the monster's buckled limbs. That's when he noticed the stinger. It rose up from behind the creature, ready to strike. The Wanderer, now barefoot, having lost footwear to the sludge, raced forward and intercepted it, slicing it off before it could pierce Ral's chest. Instead, it twisted and landed flat across the side of his face, sticking there. The injured strider swung its head fast enough to knock the Wanderer off her feet and knock the wind out of her too. She bounced and rolled into another puddle of sludge. She held onto her sword, but the blade also dipped into the goop, and winded as she was having trouble extricating it. The strider's jaws descended toward her. Ral, who still had one hand free, blasted the monster right between its 8 eyes. It reared back, screaming, and then collapsed completely dead. But the victors weren't exactly out of the woods. Both were stuck to the tile floor. Ral was pinned under a leg and still had one hand stuck to his forehead, and the monster's stinger stuck to his cheek, and the Wanderer couldn't lift her sword. At which point a door opened and Ral raised his head to see a small humanoid creature, blue-skinned, female, and almost spherical, emerge. He peered in, saw the two trapped planeswalkers, and shouted, "Yes, yes! Now! Now! Go!" He stepped back, and half a dozen similar homunculi raced into the room holding simple daggers. Normally, this group wouldn't represent much of a threat, but given the planeswalkers' current straits, the little creatures and their sharp knives might be very dangerous indeed. So Ral didn't take any chances. He blasted the closest one with a bolt. The Wanderer managed to channel the kinetic energy from the strider's last head slam into her sword. She twisted the blade and was able to slice through the hardening sludge and free the sword in time to stab a second creature. Ral blasted 3 more, and the 6th tripped, face planting to a pool of the black goo, Unable to free himself, the homunculi struggled and then struggled no more as it apparently suffocated, or apparently drowned in sludge. The original spherical homunculus said, "Oh dear," and ran back through the open door, not even bothering to close it behind her. No new threat appeared, but there was still the battle to extricate themselves. It took considerable effort and way too much time than made either of them comfortable, but they managed it. Once more, the Wanderer planeswalked away. She was gone for much longer, at least a long minute or two, but she finally returned and crossed to Raoul, pushing the Strider's leg off his legs and cutting him out of the clothing that was stuck to the floor. She very carefully cut the stinger off his cheek, managing to do it without cutting off any skin. But Raoul had to fry the sludge on his forehead to free his hand. The frying pitch left behind a sizable burn mark and the stench of roasted flesh, and it was extremely painful. But once this was all over and Tezzeret was dead, a healing spell would fix it up fine. He caught his reflection in a metal table and saw that his hair was a sticky disaster too. He'd probably have to shave his head when he got back to Dog's Run. But hair grows back. Still, it was all a bit of a blow to his vanity. He had to lose one boot, so he ditched the second one as well. By the time they were done, they were both barefoot and dressed in sliced up rags. It was a minor miracle that none of the sludge had gotten in or on Raoul's accumulator. They looked toward the open door, exchanged a glance. "Ready for the next ambush?" he asked. He shrugged resignedly. They walked through the door together, but there were no more ambushes. They entered an immense open-air arena, filled with towering machines of unknown purpose, and standing in the center of it all was a smiling Tezzeret, flanked by the lead gargoyle and the little spherical homunculus. The artificer made an expansive gesture with his ethereum arm and declaimed, "Welcome to my grand laboratory, Zarek. I thought you'd never get here." Raoul smiled too. No more sideshows. Time for the main event.